Did you recently receive a letter from the SBA regarding your Paycheck Protection Program, or known as PPP, or maybe an Economic Injury Disaster Loan, known as EIDL? If you did, and you didn't apply for either one of these, you could be a victim of PPP or EIDL identity fraud. Welcome to the Carrie Kursky Show, your partner in the fight against identity theft, fraud, and cyber threats. I'm your host, Carrie Kursky. If you've received a letter from the SBA regarding your PPP or EIDL loan, don't throw it away. Some people have received these letters thinking it was junk mail or a scam and threw the letters away. It was actually a warning sign that a fraudulent loan was taken out using their identity, either their personal or their business identity. So what are the PPP and EIDL? Well, the PPP is a non-repayable forgiven loan from the SBA to help businesses retain their employees during the COVID crisis. As long as the employer used the funds as required, the loan should be forgiven. The EIDL was created to help meet the financial needs of struggling businesses that were negatively impacted by COVID. The EIDL, unlike the PPP, must be repaid. However, if certain criteria is met, the business could refinance the EID loan into a PPP and have that loan forgiven. While these programs were a lifeline for many businesses during the crisis, they also presented an opportunity for fraud. In my opinion, the SBA made 3 fatal mistakes when rolling out these programs. The first one, the application process for these SBA loans were streamlined to expedite the approval process. Anytime you streamline a process, that means you're cutting corners and you're not putting as much compliance or due diligence in place as you should. The second fatal mistake, businesses were originally required to apply with their bank. That's because you already had a relationship with them, and it would help further prove that you are part of that business organization, and the financial institution would have your financial history for the business. In an attempt to further streamline the approval process, the SBA announced that the business could apply with any financial institution, including virtual or online banks. And the third final mistake, because the PPP loans are forgivable, the financial institutions were not required to do a credit check before approving the application. Now, some financial institutions did go ahead and do it. They did have the liberty of choosing if they wanted to do a credit check or not. It was up to their own discretion. But in the beginning, many of them were not doing this. So now we know the 3 fatal mistakes that led to these vulnerabilities that the bad guys exploited. Let's talk about how they were able to fill out the applications. Well, we saw there's 2 different types of techniques that they were using. The first one is they were filling out applications for fake businesses that weren't even in operation and they never even really existed. How were they able to do it? Well, due to data security breaches since 2005, over 1 billion personal records have been exposed nationwide. The odds of your personal information available for sale online are extremely high. Did you know that anyone with internet access can purchase a name, date of birth, and social security number for less than $1? Yep, it really is just that easy. With this information, the bad guys completed the applications using the fictitious businesses along with fake financial documents. In many of the cases that we're aware of, the bad guys used the victim's first name or last name followed by the word farms. That now became the business name. Since the victim's social security number was used, as opposed to a business FEIN or tax ID number, if the victim had a good credit score, the loan was likely to be approved. That's if the financial institution even did a credit check. Another thing that we've noticed is that many of these loans that were approved and the funds were paid out, they were for $48,900 or less. We're not quite sure why yet. Maybe that was a threshold where the bad guys figured out that there would be less scrutiny and the applications would be approved much easier. Not quite sure, but it just seems kind of unusual that there'd be so many loans for the exact same dollar amount. As far as proof of ID, the bad guys applied online with the virtual banks. Not in all cases, but in many of these cases. And most, if not all of these virtual banks require very little information or no information for proof of identity except for sending documentation, such as tax returns. Well, the bad guys would fake those too. If a driver's license was required, bad guys could easily make a fake one. Unfortunately, the banks do not confirm the photo on the ID matches the photo in that state's DMV database. But not all of the applications were for fake businesses. We received call from a few businesses that discovered someone had used their business identity to apply for a loan or even multiple loans. In many states, business records are available to the public. For example, in Florida, anyone can search for businesses registered to conduct business in the state by visiting sunbiz.org. This information listed for each business often includes the business address, officer information, FEIN, which is the tax ID number. It's the equivalent to a social security number before a business, and any other information required for the PPP or EIDL applications. This made it really easy for the bad guys to assume the identity of a legitimate operating business to apply for the PPP or the EIDL. As mentioned earlier, if you received a letter from the SBA regarding your PPP or EIDL loan and you didn't apply for one, don't throw that letter away. That's the first warning sign that someone has used your identity, whether it's your business's identity or your personal identity, to apply for one of these loans. But there are some other warning signs as well. Some of the victims noticed a hard credit inquiry from the SBA on their credit report. The EIDL required a credit check while the PPP defaulted to the discrepancy of the financial institutions. Some did credit checks, some did not. If you saw an inquiry from the SBA on your personal credit report, you might be a victim. If you own a business, check your business credit report. If you see an inquiry from the SBA, your business might be a victim. If you received a letter from the SBA regarding a fraudulent PPP or EIDL loan, contact the financial institution where the loan was approved and the SBA to report the fraud. Identity theft, fraud, and cyber threats are constantly changing. Don't get left behind. Sign up for my free newsletter at carriekursky.com. No fluff, just facts. Cut the crap, get the truth.